teaching collaboration with the Ordinata City University. So this is a panel discussion, and before we begin, may we invite everyone to feel the presence of the Almighty God with this invocation hymn.
Almighty Father, source of truth and light, we thank you for your grace that sustains us. May your love inspire our hearts to serve with integrity and commitment, working together in unity and purpose. Strengthen our responsiveness to the needs of others, and let your word be the lamp to our feet as we build communities rooted in peace, justice, and service.
اللهم إنا نشكرك على نعمتك التي لا تحمى فقولوا قلوبنا بالإيمان وهدي أفولنا بالحكمة واتقى توابنا في حديمة الآخرين واجعل أعمالنا حدلا وكلماتنا صدقا وهدفنا موقفا لمسيرتك آمين.
Magbabala, magdaging sa kinaiyahan, pigpasalamatan day, sa grasya daw palangangin hubugta hakabilin. Buligi kay, mapadayon sa pagpangalagad daw pagpasalamat. Pag ilahu mga kalas laasan day, pag uyam mo hualan linimbag, iila kanay sa kagsabuwa daw kalandang hualan buhay. Amen.
All right, good morning once again. Before we begin to award the conduct of this panel discussion, a webinar on Translanguaging-Aware assessments, let me introduce myself. My name is Ricky Basilio, and I will be your host for today's session. Before we officially begin, here are a few reminders for our participants today. So this webinar will be recorded and we want to keep our microphone muted during the discussion for those participants who are not speaking. And you will have, of course, the opportunity to unmute and speak later during the open forum. Before leaving the session, make sure to complete the evaluation form through the QR code that will be flashed on the screen. And your response will also serve as your official record of attendance for this webinar. All right, so to formally open this webinar, may we invite Dr. Ryan de los Reyes, Dean of the College of Teacher Education at the Ordinata City University, to give us his welcome remarks. Sorry.
Hi. Hello po, good morning po sa ating lahat. I hope you hear me from my end clear. Yeah.
Yes po.
Thank you so much. Of course, I would like to give recognition and congratulations in advance to this activity. Of course, to this activity that we are conducting this day toward translanguaging-aware assessments, rethinking the English-only practices in Philippine higher education. Of course, I'm very honored to give the opening remarks to this program. And I highly recognize, of course, our Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Josephine S. Lambinicio, to the panel of discussants this day to be well introduced. Of course, We are we are very grateful of this opportunity that you are giving us this chance to listen and to know more of this activity this day. To our distinguished guests, administrators, educators, researchers, and of course, if we have student scholars here, it is my honor to welcome you all to this meaningful gathering with, of course, the same toward Translanguaging-Aware assessment, rethinking the English-only practices in Philippine higher education. Today, we come together to examine one of the most crucial and timely issues in our academic landscape, the need to rethink how language is used, valued, and assessed in our classrooms. As education continues to evolve, so must our understanding of how multilingual learners make meaning and demonstrate knowledge. I'm an English teacher for more than a decade. Of course, English only practices have dominated Philippine higher education, often limiting students' ability to express complex ideas using the full range of their linguistic resources. But emerging research and global trends highlight that multilingualism is not a barrier, it is an intellectual asset. By embracing translanguaging aware assessments, we recognize that allowing students to draw from Filipino, regional languages, and English can lead to deeper learning, more authentic demonstrations of competence, and more equitable academic opportunities. This shift challenges us to revisit long held assumptions and to reimagine our pedagogical and assessment designs. As we embark on today's discussions, may we carry an open mind and a shared commitment to educational innovation. Let this be forum be a space for critical reflection, collaborative thinking, and forward-looking solutions. May our conversations today spark meaningful reforms in our institutions, Urdaneta City University, and the rest of the institutions in the Philippines and in the world that will empower us to cultivate learning environments that honor linguistic diversity, uphold academic rigor, and ultimately uplift the Filipino learner. So for the rest of our attendees this day, to our panel discussants, to our Acelt head, and to the rest of the attendees who will be coming later on, let us enjoy this day. Agyaman kami unay, iti oras nga interview tatta. Balbalag ya salamat. Maraming salamat. Thank you from Urdaneta City University and to our very own Ma'am Rhea Agibway, who is giving us the opportunity again to learn the translanguaging. So to everybody, congratulations in advance, and we look forward for a good conversation this morning. God bless po.
Thank you so much, Dr. De Los Reyes, for that warm welcome and for grounding this session or this discussion in the importance of conversations, specifically on the topic of translanguaging aware assessments. At this juncture, we will hear a brief message from the Vice President for Academic Affairs of Urdaneta City University, Dr. Josephine S. Labinicio. Ma'am.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. May I recognize, of course, our dear participants from the Ateneo Center for English Language Teaching, Dr. Cecilia Suarez, ma'am, the mentor of this event, and Dr. Wadi Tupas from the University College of London, sir. And of course, our expert panelists for today's affair. And also, may I recognize our Dean of the College of Teacher Education, Dr. Ryan De Los Reyes, sir. The lady who is the one who spearheaded for the university, Ma'am Rhea Agibway, for the opportunity that the UCU will be one of the partner of Ateneo. And of course, our dear participants, our faculty members of the College of Teacher Education and other guests. Magandang umaga sa ating lahat. Naragsak-ngagsa pa tayo amin. Good morning. So this event is focusing toward translanguaging-aware assessments, rethinking the English on the practices in the Philippine higher education. Yes, embracing linguistic diversity is not just an option, it's a must. Let us break free from monolingual confines and honor the multilingual richness alive in our Philippine classrooms. When we rethink English-only assessments, we open doors to inclusion, empowerment, authentic learning, and the opportunity for every student to thrive, locally and globally. Let us nurture students' full linguistic repertoire because their identities, cultures, and futures deserve nothing less. May I share you with the acronym RICH, RICH, a reminder of the wealth found in our languages. R stands for recognize multiple languages. We all know that Philippines has many languages. Tagalog, Ilocano, Pangasinan, Cebuano, and many more. Letter I is integrate local languages into our curriculum and assessments. Letter C, cultivate critical thinking within diverse linguistic contexts. And letter H, harness multilingualism for global engagement and national pride. So by embracing translanguaging-aware assessments, Philippine higher education can create inclusive, culturally responsive, and truly authentic learning environments. When we value students' multilingual identities and practices, we prepare graduates who can thrive in diverse global contexts while strengthening our nation's linguistic pride. Now is the time to reimagine assessments that reflect our multilingual reality and uplift every learner's voice. So from that, congratulations and mabuhay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lambineshu, for highlighting how today's dialogue on translanguaging-aware assessments contributes to ongoing efforts to promote more equitable and inclusive teaching and learning in higher education. Of course, without compromising how we can make our students well prepared in a diverse global contexts. Okay, thank you for that once again, ma'am. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our panel of distinguished educators and practitioners who bring rich perspectives to our theme of translanguaging-aware assessments. So we'll begin with our professors, our teachers for this short course. First, we have Dr. Ruani F. Tupas, who has been teaching social linguistics and education at the Department of Culture, Communication and Media, Institute of Education, University College London. He is an associate editor of the International Journal of the Sociology of Language. He also taught at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, National University of Singapore, and National Institution of Education, and Nanyang University or Nanyang Technological University. He has published in a wide range of international journals, including Journal of Social Linguistics, Language Teaching, International Journal of Bilingual Education and Bilingualism, Literacy Research and Instruction, Literacy, Critical Inquiry in Language Studies, in RELC Journal World Englishes, Asian Englishes, Critical Inquiry in Language Studies, Journal of Language and Politics, Journal of Multilingual and Multicultural Development, Current Issues in Language Planning, Discourse, Context, and Media, Journal of Language, Identity and Education, and English in Education. He has been awarded an honorary lifetime membership by the Linguistic Society of the Philippines for his contributions to language studies. Next, we have Dr. Cecilia A. Suarez, who has been teaching undergraduate and graduate courses at the Department of English at Ateneo de Manila University. She is the executive director of the Ateneo Center for English Language Teaching, where she is also a senior trainer. She is a national trainer for the Commission on Higher Education and a master trainer and training consultant for the British Council. She earned her PhD in education, major in language education from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and her MA or master's degree in English language and literature, teaching from the Ateneo de Manila University. She has a certificate on e-learning ecologies, innovative approaches to teaching and learning for the digital age from the University of Illinois. Her research interests include multilingualism and multilingual education, translanguaging, teacher training, materials development, assessment, and evaluation, among others. Next, we have Ma'am Rhea M. Agibuay from Urdaneta City University, who has been an assistant professor in the College of Teacher Education at Urdaneta City University. She has been teaching in the university for 23 years and is currently the acting director for accreditation. Next, we have Ma'am Sherry Ann Medrano Bacolod. She is a faculty member of the Polytechnic University of the Philippines and has been teaching for the past 15 years. She has experience in both secondary and tertiary education and is currently handling pre-service teachers at the College of Education under the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And yours truly, Ricky Galapin Basilio. I'm from Rizal Technological University in Mandaluyong City, and I have been teaching at the university for 6 years, focusing on various English courses for higher education learners. Next, we have Sir Mark Tabuan, who has been teaching at the University of Northern Philippines in Vigan City, Ilocos Sur, since 2015. His expertise includes English, literature, and Ilocano courses across different academic levels in the institution. We also have here Ma'am Fina Rose Casimiro, who is now in her 7th year of teaching at Mabini Colleges Incorporated in Dait, Camarines Norte. She teaches general English education or general education, professional education, and English courses at the tertiary level. Finally, we have Ma'am Nancy Matazabat, who has been teaching in higher education since 2005 and had a chance in teaching English language and literature in collegiate level at Majma University in Saudi Arabia from 2009 to June 2025. She is currently a PhD candidate at Ateneo de Manila University, exploring on legal linguistics. All right, so before we proceed to the panel discussion with the questions we have prepared as the highlight of this webinar, let me give you first a brief context of what Translanguaging-Aware assessment is all about. So translanguaging is an approach where multilingual learners draw on their full linguistic repertoire, all the languages they know, to make meaning, learn, and communicate, rather than treating languages such as English, Filipino, and regional languages as separate systems. Translanguaging recognizes that multilinguals naturally blend and integrate these languages as part of one unified communicative process. In education, this means learners can use any language to support understanding, problem solving, and expressing ideas, viewing multilingual practices as resources rather than barriers. While widely discussed in English language education, translanguaging is relevant across disciplines where English-only practices dominate, including nursing, engineering, business law, psychology, and the sciences. English-only assessments are often justified as aligning with global standards, yet they can misinterpret students' true academic abilities as learners may fully understand concepts but struggle to articulate them solely in English. This disconnect or gap raises concerns about fairness, equity, and validity, as students may be penalized for language use rather than knowledge or reasoning. Translanguaging-aware assessments provide an inclusive alternative by allowing purposeful use of Filipino or regional languages during brainstorming, scaffolding, or collaborative work, even if the final outputs is in English. Such assessments distinguish content mastery from English proficiency, support cognitive and linguistic development, and improve engagement, confidence, and expression across subjects. Despite challenges in implementation, including entrenched English-only ideologies and limited faculty training, Translanguaging-aware assessment offers a more equitable, valid, and pedagogically sound approach for higher education in multilingual contexts. Given these realities and the growing call to re-examine how language is positioned in teaching and assessments across Philippine higher education, it becomes essential to explore the implications of maintaining English-only practices and to consider how translanguaging-aware approaches might offer more equitable alternatives. To deepen this conversation, our panel will now reflect on the key issues surrounding English-only assessment, with ways these practices are currently implemented in various higher education institutions, and the possibilities and challenges of adopting translanguaging-aware assessment designs. With this in mind, we turn to our guiding questions for today's discussion. So for the questions that will serve as the guide of this panel discussion, we have 3 questions to focus on. First, what issues arise from maintaining English-only practices in Philippine higher education, particularly in relation to equity and inclusive learning? Number 2, what English-only assessment practices are implemented by teachers in Philippine higher education institutions? And finally, what does a translanguaging-aware assessment look like, and what challenges arise when working across languages? So again, the focus in this session is on how assessment practices in Philippine higher education can respond more effectively to students' multilingual realities, moving from traditional English-only expectations toward translanguaging-aware assessments that promote equity, clarity, and access. So here's how the conversation will proceed. So each panelist will give an initial response to a guiding question. So we will flash each question, and each panelist will be giving their insights in the discussion. We will open the floor for your questions in our open forum later. So for your questions, you can just list down, take note of them as the discussions go on. Then later on, we'll have the opportunity to raise them and for our panelists to also respond to them. Okay, so I think we can start with the first question. All right, so the first question we have is, what issues arise from maintaining English-only practices in Philippine higher education, particularly in relation to equity and inclusive learning? I think we can have any panelist can volunteer to go first in giving your insights or discussion with this question we have on the screen. Or maybe, I think we can start with Ma'am Rhea.
Yes
Ma'am
po.
Rhea is smiling, so that
Thank you
signals
po.
readiness. Okay.
Thank you, Doc Wicks. And really, when we're talking about English-only practices, when we implement EOP in our classrooms, what happens, and this is also based from experience, what happens is that I usually would have silent classrooms. My students would opt to keep quiet because they are not comfortable or they have difficulty in expressing themselves in pure English. And also sometimes we have accents, the issue of accents. So when the students know that they have a regional accent, and sometimes they are embarrassed to really express themselves in a discourse because of that accent. There was a time in our institution in which we tried to implement the American accent only model, because this was the time when the BPO industry started to boom in our country, and because of this, there was this marked interest that if in case you will not make it as a teacher, at least you have a chance to go to the BPO industry. So because of that, I noticed really that if I would implement, okay, you have to make sure you follow the American accent, and you have to also speak in straight English. What happens is that students would really be embarrassed, and they would not speak at all. And really, we can see the inequity in this kind of practice. So I think the others would also like to contribute, Sir Briggs.
Let me share also, Sir Rick. Okay. In addition for that, one major issue is the inequality as students from diverse linguistic backgrounds, they may struggle to fully demonstrate their understanding of complex concepts due to limited English proficiency. Even if they have strong knowledge in the subject area, they feel less vocal in speaking about what they want to say. This lead to cognitive overload where students spend more mental effort translating their ideas into English rather than focusing on critical thinking or problem solving. English-only policies also risk marginalizing local languages and culture, signaling that Filipino or regional languages are less valued, which can negatively affect the students' identity and sense of belonging. This was also stated by Kanagaraja in 2006. Additionally, such practices can create learning barriers for students in higher order tasks, as they may understand the content but are penalized for language limitations. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Nancy. May we hear from Sir Mark?
Good morning to everybody. I'd like to deal with this question as and with with who students are and who they want to be with within these two lenses. So who are our students? They come from different backgrounds, different cultures. So I agree with with uh, with the other panelists that when we impose English only policy, we risk marginalizing who they are, what their languages are. So it's actually difficult, a little bit difficult to think and speak in English only. Perhaps we even if even for us English teachers, that's a little bit difficult. So, for instance, you go to another country and you have to speak with no Filipino, with no Ilocano, with no Pangasinan, then that's also a struggle for us. So, how much more for our students who are still beginning to think about their future careers. And speaking of careers, that's who they want to be. So in their future careers, they will not only use English, they will be expected to communicate with different clients, for instance, or students. So whether they are in different programs such as nursing, for example, or communication, or the healthcare, and so on and so forth. So in all of these fields, in all of these professions in which they will find themselves in eventually, they will have different languages in order to deal with the people whom they will encounter uh, in these careers. So to prepare them for these careers, we should be able to visit repertoire all of their languages so that they would be career ready. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sir Mark. May we hear from Ma'am Sherry?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much po to allow me to share my insights about this question also. So yes, in our classroom practices, not only in the basic education level but also in the tertiary level, we treat English as a sole legitimate medium of academic expression because it has been the norm that okay, teaching, a classroom teaching solely relies on English without recognizing the other languages or the linguistic repertoire of the students in the classroom. Okay. So as a result of subscribing or maintaining to these English only practices in our education system, so it tends to create barriers to equity and inclusive learning, just like what the other discussants have explained. And it privileges the students who are already fluent in English while marginalizing those whose strongest languages are Filipino or other regional tongues. Okay, for example, in my experience as a college teacher, whenever there are group presentations, collaborative works, and each group will select a student to present the output, they always choose, or the group members always choose the students who has um who has this excellent language speaking skills. And during classroom recitation, if the student knows that English is the only language allowed to use to express himself in the discussion, they parang it limits them to explain, or it limits them to express their ideas because they are not confident enough to use the English language. But deep inside, we know that there is more that that student can contribute to the discussion. Okay, so maybe it's time to rethink of these English only practices and start um, adopting the aware approaches in teaching and learning that will allow our learners to use their full linguistic repertoire to show what they truly understand. Thank you po.
Thank you, Ma'am Sherry. We have Ma'am Faye.
So most of my group mates already said the gist or the important points. That's why I would like to emphasize the and complement the answer of Sir Mark, wherein in the context of our students, in my case, they are the tertiary students taking up mostly BS Ed English or education, mostly in education. If they will, if we will limit them as their teachers to express themselves in the language that they are not that confident with in the process of learning, maybe we are missing the point wherein some students might be able to express more only if they are in the using the language that they are most comfortable with. And in that process, we can also develop. In my case, in the context of my students, I allow them to speak in Filipino because it's always the first question. Like, ma'am, pwede po mag-Tagalog. Yeah, I allow them to do that, but provided that they will be summarizing their thoughts. So after they thought of what they are or what they want to speak, they should restate it in English because in that process or in that manner, they already somehow processed what they are thinking or what they try to express and restate it in the most or in the language that they are most comfortable with. And honestly, in that situation, most of my students, even the shy ones, actually na bibigla na lang kami na may nadi-discover na silent siya for how many years. However, when she was given the chance to speak in front of her classmates, kaya naman with the confidence, with the expression and all. So, yun po. for me.
All right, thank you, Ma'am Faye. Yeah, completely agree with everything that my co-panelists uh, discussed relative to the issues that arise from maintaining English-only practices in the Philippine higher education. Uh, First, as what were highlighted by was highlighted by Ma'am Rhea, di ba? It affects the confidence of some students who may not be that uh, proficient yet in terms of expressing themselves in the discussion, for example, in the classroom, or even when you are giving essay exams. Some students have a lot of ideas, but they are limited to uh, express them because of the limitation in terms of English vocabulary, the right words to express their ideas. And I also have encountered the same uh, in my practice of teaching English subjects in the higher education. I even was able to see comments in my teacher evaluation that students would say that they should be allowed to be able to use or speak in their native language or Filipino in our context, in recitation or even in their essays, so they can really maximize their expression of the understanding of the main concepts. It was also highlighted by Ma'am Nancy that focusing on English only in the classroom, even in assessments, can really cause cognitive overload, wherein students would expend more mental effort in translating their ideas using English instead of focusing on problem solving, for example, or any other higher order thinking skills or comprehension or critical thinking. What else? In terms of identity, Ma'am Nancy also mentioned that this somehow is putting the students in an identity crisis or sense of belongingness, wherein they might feel excluded in a group where, maybe some students may be able to speak English better than they do, and they would feel less confident, or they would feel that they do not belong, okay, in that specific context. Sir Mark also mentioned students really would, from multiple linguistic backgrounds, would really find themselves in a difficulty to express themselves, and that's given in the use of English language, especially in the Philippines. We are from a multilingual country, and the imposition of English only practices can really result in that specific challenge or problem among students in terms of expression. Uh, that was, those were also seconded by Ma'am Sherry when she mentioned that the English only practices can really create barriers in terms of equity and inclusive learning in higher education, not just in the English language classroom, but also in other content subjects or any other courses aside from English focus subjects. Uh, Another example I would like to share is also in terms of of how the teacher also uses English language in the classroom. Students sometimes would really find it hard to process difficult concepts if the teacher would use English all the time. I'm talking or I'm speaking from experience with my students. Again, going back to the evaluation I received in the past semesters, I would see some writing comments like, Sir Ricky can speak English well, but we cannot understand him. So what is the implication of that? It's either I have to simplify my English language, or I have to code switch or apply translanguaging in terms of discussing difficult concepts for my students to better understand that. So that reality is quite a concrete, you know, a concrete evidence that indeed there is an issue, a problem in terms of imposing English-only practices in a multilingual country such as the Philippines that result in, again, inequitable access to education. So that's what I can say about this question. I think we also want to hear insights from our professors, mentors, teachers, Dr. Tupas and Dr. Cheche. on
Ricky, we will probably just chime in later. We're taking down notes and I hope that you will allow us to wait until the end of the discussion because we'd like to hear from all of you first.
That's good,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep, that's I think the best option to have the conversation go first before we get the insights from our experts. Okay, I think we can proceed to the next question now. We have established that there is an issue based on the discussion of the panelists. Let's proceed to the next question. So what English-only assessment practices are implemented by teachers in Philippine higher education? So who would like to go first? Can we have Ma'am Nancy?
Okay, sir. Now this is the reality that we are facing, all of us teachers. When we talk about the English-only assessment practices in the Philippines, especially in the higher education, we see a lot of familiar patterns, right? Most teachers still require essay, research papers, and even exams to be done strictly in English. Presentations and class participations are often graded based on how well students speak or write in English, sometimes more than on the ideas they are actually presenting. Standardized tests follow the same pattern, right? They leave little room for students to use Filipino or their regional languages, even when those languages could help them better understand the questions or explain their thoughts. Now, this isn't just about being strict, because we teachers, it is often intended to prepare our students for international standards, right? I taught in Saudi Arabia for many years, and then it really helped me that, if you are articulate, our students can move higher level of their career in other countries. But the reality is it can also make students anxious or overly focused on grammar, spelling, or word choice, rather than really showing what they know. It is really very tricky when we are going to talk about that. We are going to assess only the grammar, the sentence constructions of the students. We want to maintain the English proficiency. On the other hand, we risk on limiting the students' ability to think critically, right, or creatively, because the assessment format is so rigid. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Nancy. Can we hear from Sir Mark?
I agree with Mom Nancy. That's really the pattern.
We lost Sir Mark. Can we have Ma'am Sherry instead first, while waiting for Sir Mark to?
Okay, yes, sir. Thank you so much po.
So, sorry, I was lost. Parang hindi po okay yung internet ko. Sorry.
Thank you, Sir Mark. Ma'am
Yeah.
Sherry, let's have Sir Mark continue.
Ah,
Okay na.
okay.
Thank you.
Sige po. Pasensya po ulit. I agree with Mom Nancy. That's really the pattern. So, for instance, what is the next them is often within the parameters of how well you write, how well you speak in English, and of course, as what we've been mentioning, feelings, the affect, are really important in language learning. That's why I agree. In all degree programs, English has always been seen as the prestigious language. It leads to more opportunities, and often that really materializes in the way we teach, not only in instruction but also in assessment. So, for instance, we some teachers would even prepare perhaps some items which imitate global language tests. For instance, the PISA, and I think that's a good thing. Others also would format their exams like they look like the tests in IELTS, and I think that's good. That's also good. However, we should be able to uh, and actually I agree with those tests. They actually advocate for higher order thinking skills as well as the what we call the competence and performance of students across the macro skills. However, other teachers often deal with, for example, correct pronunciation, American Standard pronunciation in speaking tests. What else? They also deal with discrete. They also have or administer discrete items in grammar without taking into account or without anchoring it on specific language skills. So, for instance, yes, important naman yung, for example, using the correct grammar, subject-verb agreement, for instance. However, we should go beyond that while also not neglecting those. So I guess that's it. Again, there's a need to revision our assessment practices so that they really lead to real communication and of course uh, including as well the different linguistic repertoire of students, not only the languages we know as text-based, rather we should also include multimodal modes and practices and resources in our language classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Mark. Yes, Ma'am Sherry, you may proceed now. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you po, Sir Ricky. Okay, in terms of English-only assessment practices, yes, I agree with the statements of Ma'am Nancy and Sir Mark that we teachers prepare assessments that are required to be strictly in English. For example, the written exams, papers, presentations, class performances, class participation. And with that, the rubrics that we prepared to be used in grading these outputs also heavily focus on grammar and vocabulary. Okay, although maybe some teachers who have this initial background about translanguaging practices have already tried using the approach to teaching, yet the assessment still is done in only one language, and that is English. And having this having this English only assessment practices um, limit the ability, or we assess we focus more on assessing the language ability of our students rather than the actual learning outcomes. So maybe we could start employing or applying translanguaging-aware assessment practices by beginning with translanguaging formative assessment. Okay, for example, the journal entries that we require our students, okay, peer review, self-assessment, or discussion board, we can employ translanguaging in that case of formative assessment. Okay, because what we want our students is to promote, we want to gain genuine understanding from our students and not just evaluate them by how well they use the English language. Thank you po.
Thank you, Ma'am Sherry. Ma'am Faye, would you like to go next?
Thanks, Sir Rex. Um, to add with what they said, with what Mom Sherry, Sir Mark, and Mom Nancy said, I would like to emphasize the word context, since the English only assessment is already there, and in fact, most of us grew with it. Now, I would like to highlight the context. There are subjects or courses wherein the English only assessment practices would be useful. For instance, in one of my subjects in structure of English, it's about grammar, vocabulary. They should be mastering the parts of speech, the lexical categories, and the syntax. Since it's the focus of the subject, the entire course focuses on developing the grammar, skills of the students. Meanwhile, in the other subjects, for instance, in purposive communication, in other major subjects in English, such as literary criticism, literature, and the ones with the teaching, I believe that the focus of those is more on developing the critical thinking skills of the students, not mainly how they will express their thoughts. That's why, if that's the case, I think we can be flexible with our rubric, with the assessment that we will use, instead of counting the grammar mistakes of the students. Why not look at the other side on how they will express, on how deep or about the quality of their answers, of their responses. So I think most of the, or if we will do that, the students will be developing the confidence. And at the same time, as teachers, we will be anchored on what we really want to assess. Is it the grammar? Is it the proficiency of the students? Or is it the critical thinking of our students? So that's it for me, Sir Rex.
I thank you, Ma'am Faye. Ma'am Rhea?
Thank you po. No, I can relate to the different contexts that were already stated by my co-panelists. And I would like to, right off the bat, I would like to say that I am an apologist when it comes to English only assessment practices before, because also from the context that I was immersed with in college. I even was part of a university debate society in which we were required to speak in straight English, and if we don't do that, if we, for instance, just utter a word in the regional language, we were penalized. Like we had to shell out 25 centavos for each word in the local language. So that was the context that I was immersed in. And then I went to the university and I carried the same context that I grew up, in the university. So my students before, also in the faculty evaluation, they were like, Ma'am Rhea, she's good in English, but she's forcing us to keep in speaking in straight English, even if we're already nervous. So that's the time when I realized, okay, the washback effect of my assessment practices, it was really having a negative toll already on my students. And so I was happy really when I learned about translanguaging and how to make sure that translanguaging practices can also be imbibed or integrated in my assessment practices. So from that time onwards, there were also some parts of my lesson in which I allow my students to use the regional languages, but there are specific parts, specifically in the performance tasks already, the output, the final output, in which I would still insist that I would have them speak in straight English because that is what is demanded by the subject. For instance, right now I'm handling speech and theater arts, so automatically the speech that they will deliver, it has to be in straight English. But in the brainstorming sessions, I would still allow them to use their local languages.
All right, thank you, Ma'am Rhea. Okay, those were substantial sharing of the status of English only assessment practices in the country. And I think we can all agree that indeed, until now, English really dominated the assessment practices in the country. For example, yung mga board exams natin, di ba, they are written in English. Even us in our classrooms, most of our assessments are really written in English, from instructions to content, even those uh, non-English subjects. Okay. I have colleagues in the office who are teaching, for example, social sciences like ethics, Philippine history. And when I saw their tests or the assessments, like right now, it's our midterm examination period. I would always see that they are written in English. Actually, I haven't seen an assessment yet, and their subject areas written in Filipino. They're all written in English. And the question there is, if you are really into measuring the understanding of, for example, the student of a certain concept, for example, in an essay, then why not allow them to use Filipino or their local dialect in expressing their understanding of the concepts? Because if we are going to force them to really use English, that can really hamper their freedom to express their their knowledge or their understanding in the language that they are most comfortable with. But of course, we acknowledge the fact that there are really some lessons or activities that really are meant to measure the linguistic skills of the students, particularly in English classes, diba? When your focus is grammar, according to Ma'am Sherry kanina, if your focus is on grammar, then we focus on grammar. But if your focus is on a different learning outcome, aside from linguistic uh, skills, then that should be the time that we allow students to really use their most comfortable language to express themselves as. Even when we are giving essay exams, di ba, lagi talaga English. And that is rooted in the culture of the Philippines in terms of how we view English, di ba, as a language. We even sometimes equate that with intelligence. And I think some of us are really, guilty with that. Uh, Pag sinabing magaling mag-English, matalino tong batang to. That's the assumption of some Filipinos. And we have been trying to challenge such uh, assumption toward English language, because that's not the reality, diba? Just because a student speaks better English than the other doesn't mean that he is more intelligent than the other person, because again, language is just one of the many intelligences. And in terms of classroom assessment practices, it really is a must to align our rules in terms of the use of language with our objectives. Okay, as what my colleagues highlighted earlier, you have to really identify what is your focus of giving the assessment. Okay, if your focus is really to develop and to assess the linguistic skills, then it's okay to in English linguistic skills, then it's okay to really require them to answer in English or give the exam in English. But if it's the other outcomes that you want to measure, then I think we have to have freedom in terms of allowing them to be able to answer or to even give them the exam or the assessment in a language that they are most familiar with. Okay, so uh, I think that sums up the discussion of the second question. May we proceed now to the third question? Okay, so what does a translanguaging-aware assessment look like? What challenges arise when working across languages? So we have already established, diba, what translanguaging-aware assessment or what translanguaging assessment is, and what are the issues in terms of uh, practicing translanguaging, or no, what are the issues in terms of English-only practices in the country? And this is our proposal, diba? We are challenging that culture of giving English only assessments, for example, by offering translanguaging aware assessment with all the benefits and of course the advantages on the part, especially of the students, with translanguaging aware assessments. Now, the question is, paano natin siya ibibigay sa estudyante? How do we construct translanguaging aware assessment? I think we can learn from everyone's insights now in terms of how, what does it look like? And what do we think are the challenges that may arise when working across languages in the assessment construction or even in the administration of the assessments? Okay, who wants to go first? Ma'am Nancy, would you like to? Oh, Sister Mark. Yes, sir.
So all those things mentioned, talagang nakikita natin na assessment is really conceptualized in through monolingual lens. It's still in the construct is still about speaking in one language, and your proficiency in another language will not come into the picture. That's why I think for a translanguaging aware assessment to be envisioned and implemented, we need to take into account the possibility, the affordances that other languages may have on the way we use English. So for instance, not only this is not only in assessment but also in classroom interaction and classroom activities, we can include other languages. For instance, we read a text in English and then we can discuss it in other languages. For example, Ilocano, or maybe we use English and as well as Filipino in discussing key terms in a certain field. Or perhaps we can also do metalinguistic reflection about terms in different languages. So, for instance, this is the term in English. What do we have in Filipino? We can also take notes. We can also have students take notes in different languages. And we can also use multilingual communication between students and teachers. So that's really important. And yes, I think all of our discussions really deal with languages. How others of why how conceptualize use of different languages. And more recent research deal really with, for example, different repertoire, including nonverbal communication resources, and as well as music, as well as sounds, as well as uh, as well as visual art and even music. So those are other materials which we can exploit and take full advantage of in our language classroom. So for us to do that, I think the best example is the purposive communication class, which is not only for English teachers, which is not only for teacher education students, future teachers, but also this is taken in different degree programs. So I'd like to cite as an example the very good book of the Acelt team, as well as the different faculty of the English department of the Ateneo de Manila University. So in that textbook really includes different activities, not only in English but also in Filipino. They include multimodal activities, such as, for example, constructing visuals when writing research papers, and so on and so forth. So those examples are possibilities for integrating different languages, different modes of communication in our English classes. And for teacher education students, that's really important because I think right now in the PPST, the Philippine Professional Standard for Teachers, it's not only about one's ability of a teacher. The ability of a teacher does not only rely on his or her ability to use English. It also includes Filipino and our regional languages. So that's really important. So in my own classes, I really take full advantage of our languages. In our case here in Ilocos, where we also use Ilocano, so that's also seen. I do that, for instance, in literary criticism mentioned a while ago by, I think, Ma'am Ma'am Casimiro. So we do not just read English texts, but also texts, literary pieces, short stories, and poetry in Ilocano. And there's also one benefit of that is hindi sila makaka-chat GPT kasi hindi alam ni chat GPT itong text na to in Ilocano. Okay? And actually, I also teach Ilocano classes, true Ilocano classes with our BA English, BA communication students. So, of course, BA communication is not only about English, they should also be able to come up with communication materials to connect with, for example, uh, other sectors of society. This is in the case of development communication. So we teach them how to, for example, construct different materials, come up with different materials, DevCom materials in Ilocano. And I think the point of all of that is uh, a translanguaging aware assessment has to deal with not only discrete language items such as grammar, pronunciation, but also it should be anchored on task-based language teaching, task-based, and of course, task-based language assessment. So it's more holistic and it requires students to draw on their different linguistic repertoire. For instance, how to say this in Ilocano, how this is in Ilocano, and then how should it be said in English, how to construct materials that respond to the needs of the community, for instance. So in this case, assessment and the evaluation of these outputs of students go beyond discrete language items in terms of accuracy and following American English standards. It's also about the appropriateness, for instance, the appropriateness, the effective impact, the effect, the, the effect of such material for target users and audiences and readers. So I guess that's it. That's a way to move beyond discrete language assessment towards a more holistic and performance-based type of assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sir Mark. That was a comprehensive discussion. Okay, nagkaroon ako bigla ng cognitive overload sa substance nung diniscuss ni Sir. But those were really um, insights that are worth noting, you know? Great. Thank you, Sir Mark, for that. Let's have Ma'am Sherry. Would you like to go next?
Okay, sir. Thank you po. So, what is now a translanguaging aware assessment? So, a translanguaging aware assessment is something that creates space for students to draw on all their languages to demonstrate learning. So, based on the discussion flow po, we could say that this kind of approach to assessment will give teachers more accurate picture of what students know, okay, rather than only evaluating their language proficiency. So in classroom assessment, it may be difficult to employ or apply translanguaging aware assessment in standardized test or paper and pencil test like multiple choice test natin, but we can apply translanguaging aware assessment and just like what I mentioned in the second question, during formative assessment, because as we all know, formative assessment is done to measure the ongoing progress of our students, okay, and also in different authentic and performance based assessments that we use in our classrooms. Okay. However, adopting this translanguaging aware assessment has challenges. And what are these challenges? We have this institutional resistance and the teacher preparedness. Okay. So institutional resistance remains strong, especially in schools or in systems where English only policies are deeply embedded in the academic culture and accreditation standards. And another challenge, when the teachers feel unprepared or they know just little information about pedagogical translanguaging, then that makes another challenge. But these challenges are like inviting us to rethink how assessment can be more inclusive and responsive to our classroom, to the linguistic realities of Filipino students. So that's why we have to rethink. We have to rethink not just our assessment practices, but also our instructional practices in the tertiary classroom. Because Translanguaging-Aware assessment values ideas over the use of language. And maybe it's time for our institutions to start breaking the old habits of subscribing to English only policies only. Thank you po.
Thank you, Ma'am Sherry. That was a strong call to action. Okay. At the end, it's time to challenge the established culture of seeing English only policy as the best way, as the only way toward uh linguistic proficiency or toward, making students learn the use of English effectively. Okay, thank you, Ma'am Sherry. Let's have Ma'am Rhea.
Um, no, I love the statement a while back of Ma'am Sherry. And really, when you're talking about translanguaging aware assessment, there is an intentionality when designing the assessment. That it allows the students to make use of their full linguistic repertoire, whether it's English or Filipino or the other regional languages. And really, we don't have the I think for some people they would say that when you're talking about translanguaging they have a little bit of hesitation in implementing translanguaging aware assessments because they are afraid that you are already having a anything goes kind of framework. But again, there is intentionality when we design it. There is still rigor, there's still integrity. We don't compromise in terms of the standards, only that there are multiple linguistic pathways that we use when we come up with the outputs that we require among our students. I would like to give an example. For instance, right now, I am teaching children and adolescent literature. So when I first handled this last year, and I was given the compendium of syllabi. And I saw that the syllabus for children and adolescent literature, the canon is highly Western. And there are, I think, only two bullet points there that would use Filipino sources. And so for this year, I made sure that I would decolonize the different texts, the different resources that we will have in my class. And starting last year, I also requested my students that in the output for the big book that they will produce, they will already make use of fractured fairy tales and localized resources. So, which means that the characters that they would have instead of Peter, they would have Pedro. And I was also one of the student groups that I had. Instead of having, for instance, Goldilocks, they had Blackilocks. Instead of having porridge, they had arroz caldo. So these kinds of allowing our students to relate to the context is something that would really celebrate the local languages that we have. Um, and in this way, when I had my students right now reflect on the process that they're having, when they're having this kind of localized fractured fairy tales, they said, "Oh, it's possible pala, ma'am. Pwede pala na gamitin namin ang ating sariling wika. But even in the context, of an English major subject." So the challenge, however, would really be again the entrenchment of the English only policies. That when we produce this, they would be like, "Huh? You allow students to use Pangasinan or Ilocano? You allow them to to make use of these terms when you should be having straight English in your classes." So I think that's something. And also because we believe in a multilingual community, we have Pangasinan, we have Ilocano in our community. There are also speakers of Bisaya, and because of this, also it's also going to be a challenge that if they will be producing these materials, it's important that there will also be like translation of these words. So that may pose a challenge if, for instance, there is a word that may not be really translatable. There's no equivalent word in the other languages. But from the experiences that we had, the students had fun doing their output. And really, translanguaging aware assessments really work in a multilingual community that we have. And Sir Ricky?
Thank you, Ma'am Rhea, for another substantial discussion. I will have something to say about that later on. Yung sinabi ni Ma'am Nancy in terms of contextualizing, and Ma'am Nancy, Ma'am Rhea, in terms of contextualizing materials. Ma'am Nancy, would you like to say something? Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Ricky. So, our last question highlights three phrases: translanguaging aware, what challenges, and we're working across languages. So, of course, there are challenges. So, the first one, I think all of us will agree, teachers may find may find grading very problematic, right? Because traditional rubrics aren't built for mixed language responses. So students may hesitate to use their first language because of the long-standing English-only norms. And the institution often still have policies that limit flexibility. You're right, Ms. Rhea. But despite this, when we are allowing the student to use the multiple languages, so many students maybe will say, oh, we can use our languages. And then you said this in your webinar. So what we are trying to say is like, we are allowing you to express yourself in the language that you are comfortable with, but the final output, you must have an effort to explore yourself, to discover more of the correct English words that you will use after you brainstorm the ideas that you got from your conversation in your first language. So what we are saying here is the despite of allowing the students to use multiple languages strategically, we can help them to improve the understanding, their critical thinking and creativity, right? Then while still we are supporting the English learning because we are teaching English. That's our first priority, to enhance them, to improve their English for global connections. So in the end of my, I think my end words for this, it's like translanguaging aware assessments make learning more inclusive, meaningful, and reflective of the real world communication. In the end, we teachers, we need to support them to maximize their competency in speaking of the English language also. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ma'am Nancy. So I think, the translanguaging aware assessments on, how it looks like or what it looks like is clear based on my co-panelists' discussion that it should offer opportunities for every student to really access their diverse linguistic repertoire in terms of expressing their what they have learned, okay? What they have learned in every subject, including English, of course. As what my co-panelists shared earlier, kahit sa literary criticism, diba? We can allow them to really use the local language in the discussion. However, I think one challenge that we have in terms of really considering, catering to the different linguistic backgrounds of the students is the preparedness of the teachers, what Ma'am Faye, I think, or Ma'am Sherry mentioned earlier. And I want to connect that to Ma'am Rhea's statement on contextualizing materials and even the assessments in the sense that we may use materials written in the local language and we can write or prepare assessments in the local language. The problem there is, I think, the same problem that the implementation of the MTB MLE in the country faced, that students in a certain classroom may come from different linguistic backgrounds. Like, that's what my colleagues mentioned earlier, may Bisaya, may kunyari from Luzon, Ilocano, Cebuano, Ilonggo. that's a that's a big challenge for a teacher who may not be uh fluent in all of these languages. For example, in Metro Manila, di ba, I have diverse students here. I have students from the north, okay, Metro Manila, Visayas, Mindanao. So how, coming up with an assessment that is translanguaging aware in order to promote equity in the classroom in terms of assessment is really quite a challenge for a teacher. Again, especially if the teacher is not really uh, well versed in all the languages present in the classroom. So if you focus only on maybe providing the assessment both in English and Filipino, then there's no equity there if your students some of the students really are comfortable with Cebuano or Ilonggo. So yun yung challenge natin. But that is something that I don't know how we can address that because that can really take a lot of time training. I'm thinking we have to train teachers to be fluent or be well versed in all languages in the country, but that is something that is quite ambitious, okay, because it's quite difficult to achieve or maybe not feasible for all teachers.
Sir
Yes,
Ricky,
ma'am.
I think Doc Cheche wants to say something.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Cheche.
Yeah, I think it would be good also to explore, coming from your own experiences, how we can address that question that you just asked. It may be challenging, but maybe the panel members here, co-panel members, may have an idea or two on how that can be addressed. So yes, of course, teacher training is important, but maybe some of you may have an idea.
Yes, sir, Mark.
I think it begins with unlearning some ideologies when it comes to our languages. I guess that's the first step because if we always look down at our own local languages, then hindi yun mag-work. And I think another thing is uh, maybe let's I think one challenge is dun sa practical scenario niya, may mga students pa rin na, for example, they're still better in English and they don't know the, for example, correct uh, spelling or correct sentence structure in Filipino or Ilocano. I think that's uh, one challenge.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Sorry, Mark, any other insights on that? Any practice that you guys have in your classroom uh, in terms of translanguaging aware assessments among
I think
diverse students?
Nancy is raising her hand. Um, maybe I put this on my paper. I proposed the performance-based communicative assessment that is embedded within a strategic English immersion model. This is just like approaches that emphasizes authentic task that mirror real-world communicative demands such as interviews, debates, presentations, and collaborative problem solving, wherein we ask our students to just pretend, simulate that they were in the debate and they are talking about just simple topics, but the input will be like short short output of the English communications, wherein they can also use the language that they are comfortable with. But the output, as I said again, it's more on the performance-based communicative assessment that immerse in the strategic use of the English language in the real-world communication. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Nancy. I think I may share something. In my purposive communication class, my final output requirement for my students is a campaign video. Um, Students would always ask, "Sir, can we use Filipino or Tagalog in our content?" And I would always point them back to their purpose and their audience in coming up with a campaign video. And I think I also allow them to I also would allow them to come up with a campaign video with a local audience and another campaign video for international audience. in that sense, they can practice both local languages and English as an international language, striking a balance in terms of, again, the use of the multiple languages. Any
I
other
think
insights? Yes, ma'am.
subjects, I would like to add, since there are still subjects that are highly technical, for instance, subjects like technical writing and other subjects that really require students to write, such as the research subjects, I think this can be or these subjects can be translanguaging aware in a sense that we can focus on how, or for instance, instead of focusing on the grammar, like counting the grammar mistakes of the students, maybe we can focus on the flow of the expression of ideas of the students. For instance, what I did with my literary criticism class, aside from using texts in Bicol, I taught them how to express themselves in a certain format. In that case, I am expecting that they will be organizing their thoughts based on the flow that I gave them. And at the same time, based on Ma'am Nancy's answer, we should also rethink of our rubrics. Is it nearly or is it mainly focused on the mechanics, organization? Do we really count those? Or do we focus on the flow of ideas, the clarity of expressions, the how deep the ideas are, and how is it well supported with the references that they read? So that's it for me, sir.
Thank you, Ma'am Faye. Yes, Ma'am Rhea.
And also when it comes to rubrics, I also had to be mindful that I would put there really the translanguaging component. Um, Usually before I would just have fluency, the usual. But then there is a part there in which there is a mindful and intentional use of the local languages, integration of the local languages when it is appropriate. So it's part of my rubrics already, so that the students would also be cued that they are allowed to do that when it's appropriate. And usually, this is the part where in the process, in the brainstorming sessions, I would really allow my students to use their Ilocano or Pangasinan or Bisaya, and if that's where they're comfortable with in using.
All right, thank you, Ma'am Rhea. Yes, Ma'am Cheche.
Okay, so I think right now I can share my general observations and would like to say that um that I actually share your collective stance on this, actually more for the sake of our audience, because the purpose for being here is really to share our best practices with them, no? Um, that the collective stance of the panel members is that we we see the importance, the role of our local languages in the teaching of English. And of course, not only English, although that's what we're focusing on. And so in terms of teaching English and using our local languages, Miss Rhea already mentioned that it is something that is not anything goes, because we have to remember purpose, audience, context, and then the design. And just like what was mentioned earlier, it's important that teachers are aware of how possible it is to purposely design translanguaging activities in the classroom. And that is what we always refer to as pedagogical translanguaging, because pedagogical translanguaging requires us to be more mindful of the way that we use translanguaging or employ translanguaging in the classroom. And so we do it with purpose, we do it judiciously. And as mentioned earlier, I think I admire the efforts of our panel members in doing whatever they can and they could
in implementing translanguaging in their classrooms. For example, yung mga formative assessments na binigay na example kanina ni na Ma'am Sherry, I think from everybody, Sir Mark, Sir Ricky, Ma'am Nancy, Ma'am Faina, and Miss Rhea. So we know that that's very important. But we have to remember, again, for the sake of those who are joining us in this conversation, that translanguaging is not a goal. It is just a tool. Okay? So translanguaging as a goal, meaning we do not go inside the classroom keeping in mind na, ay, magta-translanguage ako kasi multilingual ang students ko. Hindi. Ang translanguaging ginagamit natin as a tool because it is used to scaffold learning. As already discussed earlier among our panel members, it's research-based. We know that when we use the students' language, the language that they know, their linguistic repertoire, to help them understand the concept, then they will understand the concept kasi naiintindihan nila. But if you keep talking to them about a concept that's not familiar to them, tapos hindi pa familiar yung language, for example, English, what do we expect? Diba? So, hindi talaga magkakaintindihan. So, we want to make sure that we use translanguaging as a tool, and as teachers, we know the context that our students are in when we teach them, when we're in the classroom. So, for example, dun sa design na na-mention ni Ms. Rhea kanina, that is part of the teacher training that we do at Acelt. And kasama si Ms. Rhea doon. And I am really glad na ini-implement niya na sa mga classes niya. That, yun nga, in terms of the design, you look at specific parts of your lesson where you think translanguaging will work best. Kasi kilala niyo yung estudyante niyo eh. 'Di ba? Kilala niyo rin, kayo din ang nakakaalam kung ano ang requirements ng course. So we use translanguaging as a tool without sacrificing and compromising the learning competencies, the curriculum goals, the program goals. And in relation to that, we also have to remember, to those who have concerns about how this is going to be acceptable in terms of our classroom practices, because siguro yung mga administrators, supervisors will expect them to speak English when they observe you. You have to remember that translanguaging is already part of the language framework of the Department of Education. It is in the DepEd revised curriculum. Yung dating tinatawag na matatag and now revised curriculum, it is there. Nasa discussion yan, and plurilingualism, plurilingual practices, that is also translanguaging, yung practice ng translanguaging is explicitly stated there. And mentioned earlier by Sir Mark, yung PPST, yung professional standards natin sa DepEd, that is also translanguaging, or the use of local languages is also mentioned there, that we can use our local languages to help facilitate learning. So that is our goal here, to help everybody see the value of using translanguaging, and of course the use of our local languages in our own classroom. So maganda yung sinabi kanina na yung context of assessment. Ano ba ang context ng assessment natin in the classroom? Well, we do not have control over assessments done beyond our classrooms, but we have control over something that is within the classroom. So yung formative is important, pero kung allowed na tayo, if we are allowed to make modifications in the actual assessment tool itself, siguro it may take a while for that to happen, but maybe that will happen. Okay, but what we need to do is to start shifting our mindset and our practices in the classroom so that we become more inclusive. So yun lang. Again, please remember that translanguaging is a tool. It is not a goal. Okay, thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Ma'am Cheche, for that clarifying discussion. We just want to reiterate again, translanguaging is not a goal, but a tool that best facilitates student learning. Okay. All right, so I think we can proceed to our Q&A session. We have a few minutes left before 12, so we can hear from our participants any questions for clarification or any statement they want to share relative to the questions that we had in the discussion. Before that, I would like to read yung sinabi ni Sir Mike sa chat box. I wonder whether there will be a time we can allow our students to translanguage in the written outputs. That is, essays contain both English and Ilocano sentences or paragraphs, not just individual words. I think it goes back to what Ma'am Cheche explained, diba? We have to consider the context of our assessment, and also maybe someday if we want to really see translanguaging as the best assessment uh, a way to assess students, then maybe it may happen, but may take a while. So, but we still
Ricky,
start with yes, ma'am.
kasi I think in relation to that question of Sir Mark, some contexts are already maybe applying that, especially if it's creative writing. Pwede naman. Yun lang, in terms of academic writing, well, creative writing is part of academic writing, but maybe in other contexts, yun nga, hindi pa. But we hope that that's something that can be done as well, no, in other contexts outside creative writing. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, ma'am, for clarifying that. Okay. And yep, the floor is now open for your questions. We have Sir Mark to facilitate the open forum. So anybody from our participants may raise questions now. Sir Mark, you may take over.
Thank you, sir. To our audience, perhaps you can ask 2 questions or 3. Uh, you can turn on your mic or your camera or just your mic if that's what you're comfortable with. Or you can also put your question in the chat box. We have one question here from Sir Javrik. What principles should guide teachers when intentionally designing translanguaging opportunities in language or literature? Perhaps anybody from my fellow panelists can answer this question.
Okay, can I just address that? Maybe Miss Rhea, you can help me with this, especially that you attended one of the trainings in pedagogical translanguaging, but I don't think we have enough time to discuss the entire framework. But what we're using in that teacher training is the framework designed by Garcia et al., Ophelia Garcia et al., and that has to do with pedagogical instruction, pedagogical translanguaging instruction. And it's a framework that considers all the different parts of our lessons from explorar, meaning yung motivation, that is the first part of our lesson, all the way up to assessment. And again, in the trainings that we give, that would usually take about 1 day. So we don't have the time to do that, but there is. So if you want to check it out, that is a framework designed by Ophelia Garcia et al. On translanguaging framework. Okay, thank you. Ms. Rhea, do you remember something from there?
Yes po. I remember po that there is kind of like they would correspond actually to some of the terms that we're already familiar, like from motivation up to the performance and all that. So we're very familiar already with those terms, only that Garcia et al. Made the framework that would really highlight how we can use translanguaging in the different stages of the class in which we can utilize and leverage the local languages of our students. And I also appreciated that during the discussion on pedagogical translanguaging, it was emphasized that there are parts of the lesson in which it is expected that if the output is in English, then by all means, we are expecting that our students would speak in English or use the English language. Because again, there is intentionality in the way that we design our classes. I really appreciate that because the framework would show, okay, these are the parts where we can scaffold the students' learning by allowing them to use the local languages. So perhaps you can check it out. And also, if there are trainings, future trainings on pedagogical translanguaging by Acelt, we would really love to have our faculty undergo the capability training so that they would also be well versed in using pedagogical translanguaging.
Ma'am, can I add? Ma'am, is it also the principle of Kanagaraja? The keywords there is the enmeshing, right?
Oh,
Wherein
enmeshing?
Kanagaraja.
Yes,
Yes,
that's right.
I remember we had this with Dr. Kanilaw, and she highlighted about this, the work of Kanagaraja. It's the keywords for that is the enmeshing, supporting. They are intertwined, they are interrelated. It's a tool that help the student to explore more and be creative. That's
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
aside from Ophelia Garcia's et al.'s framework is very specific to pedagogical translanguaging. Kanagaraja's is more general, but they all support translanguaging in the
Thank you.
classroom. Thank you.
I think we have another question here. How from Ma'am Mara G. Pelaez of Urdaneta City University, how can BSc English majors balance the institutional expectation through model English competence draw on Filipino and other local languages? Would like to answer po.
Sir Mark, I'm sorry that was a bit choppy from my end. Which one are we answering again?
Uh,
I think Sir Mark is
I think this one, ma'am. How can I will repeat it. How can BSE English majors balance the institutional expectation to model English competence while using translanguaging practices that naturally draw on Filipino and other local languages?
Okay. We discussed this in class. Any of you
Parang
can
balance.
answer. Any of you can answer. We discussed this in our course. Nakikinig dyan si Dr. Tupas. Sige. Di ba based on research, we know that, sige, Nancy, go ahead.
It's okay, Doc. You go ahead.
Sige. Di ba based on research, we've established that the use of the local languages, the languages that the students know, can help in terms of developing an additional language, any additional language. Kaya nga yung mindset natin is additive. So if the students are learning a language that is not familiar to them, you start where they're at. Di ba yan ang lagi nating sinasabi sa mother tongue-based multilingual education. You begin where the students are at. And where are they at? They're at the stage where they can use their local languages to learn. So we use that knowledge to help them learn another language. So as long as we do it systematically, research tells us that it works. Again, meron caveat doon, as long as we do it systematically. So hindi siya anything goes. So ang focus really is on the part of the teachers knowing what to do when and how. So ang challenge is nasa teachers. So teacher training. So yan, that's how we will address that.
And in addition po to Doc Cheche's statement, maganda po yun, hindi siya subtractive kundi additive. So for most of us, I think we are in the teacher education colleges in our respective universities. It's very important that we start as early as now among our students when it comes to ideologies. Dito kasi nagsisimula eh. Usually, dito naman isa sa mga nagsisimula when we are establishing our professional identities. So instead of being put in a box of okay, dapat American English and then English only ang medium of instruction. It's very important that as early as now we start with our own different classrooms. The problems that we face when it comes to these issues would be systemic, and because they're systemic, it's very important that we don't feel overwhelmed, but we capacitate ourselves and we capacitate our students. We start with what we can do. And when we start the conversation going, I think in the next generation of the future teachers that we are handling now, they might not have the same resistance that we might be facing right now when it comes to using translanguaging-aware assessments. So yun po yung magandang mag-start na po tayo ngayon.
May I also add po? Okay po. So, yes, aside from the idea that L1 supports the learning of L2, I would also like to emphasize the what was mentioned by Sir Ricky earlier po, that translanguaging is a tool that best facilitates learning. So, in case of teaching pre-service teachers, we have to explain to them clearly that we are using translanguaging practices as tools to better facilitate learning. But they still have to keep in mind that, yes, they have to model English language competence as future English teachers. So parang ipapaintindi lang po natin sa kanila na we are helping them to make learning more meaningful, to create meaning easily and more inclusively through the translanguaging practices.
Oh, can I
Sige
add
pa.
to that? It's something that we always see also, that we do not code switch, we do not use translanguaging, we do not resort to another language just because we cannot sustain our expression of ideas in one language, and for example, English. So we use, just like what Miss Sherry said, we still need to be good models in terms of communication. But when we say model, we're not looking at one standard, quote unquote, English, huh? We're not looking for something that, you know, that we think, kasi yun nga yung dinidebunk natin eh, as the standard. So, again, we make sure that we still become models of communication, language and communication with our students, but we use translanguaging because there's a purpose for it. Hindi yung bigla na lang tayo nagtagalog kasi naubusan na tayo ng English. Hindi, dapat if we can sustain it because it is what is necessary, then we speak English. If there's a need to use the local languages, then we integrate that. And in terms of pedagogical translanguaging, we have to remember that there's teachers translanguaging and learners translanguaging. So kailan mo ilalagay, kailan mo ide-design yung activity so that you can allow students to use translanguaging, and you yourself, in terms of your design, must use translanguaging. Okay? Thank you.
I think we can address one more question since we have very few minutes left. Uh, in multilingual classrooms, this is from Monira Khalid Zareno from UCU. In multilingual classrooms, what potential problems can occur when translanguaging is not guided or intentional? And how can teachers structure translanguaging so that it becomes a strategic tool?
Mark, can I come in?
Sure, sir.
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to apologize. No, I cannot turn on my camera. It's just before 4 o'clock in the morning. But I have been intently listening to everybody and been really very much excited about the conversations. At maraming salamat po sa lahat ng participants to who are here. Well, first and foremost, I think the question assumes that spontaneous translanguaging doesn't happen in the classroom. In fact, a lot of times we have to admit it. Kahit nga wala yung mga policies na ito that allow for translingual possibilities, we do translingual strategizing in the classroom, and much of it is really more in terms of spontaneous. And why is it spontaneous or translanguaging? Because as teachers, we know that at certain points, um, probably we need to explain to our students certain conceptual difficulties, di ba? So kailangan natin gumamit ng lahat ng mga linguistic resources para maintindihan ng mga estudyante kung ano yung ibig sabihin ng itong term na ito and so on and so forth. So actually, kahit wala naman itong discussion na ito, nagda-translinggo lang naman talaga tayo eh, 'di ba? There's a lot of research that shows halimbawa research on teachers, basically saying na I mean do you do translingual work? Do you code switch? Do you use the first language in the classroom? There's a very low percentage of teachers saying so. Pero the same teachers being observed, all right, actually mataas yung percentage na ginagamit nila. So in other words, it's sometimes all in the mind. Sinasabi na wala, hindi kami ginagamit. Parang it's more like a desire, projection. Pero um, ang nangyayari inside the classroom ay nagta-translanguage yun. But why do we, why is there discrepancy between these reality and projection? Dahil sa takot. Number one, takot ng mga teachers na mabansagan na hindi ka competent na teacher kasi you use the L1. Alright? Number two, minsan hindi rin takot, yung ideology. Alright? Yung pag-iisip na minana pa natin noon, during colonial eras, for example, na sinasabi na pag gumagamit tayo ng L1, kung nagta-translanguage tayo, hindi tayo magaling na teacher, or it will actually bring down the proficiency of our students. I think I don't have to repeat what everyone else has said. Na translanguaging is there as a way to scaffold learning. Translanguaging is there because actually it's empirically proven, right, that it actually helps facilitate the learning of English. So hindi kalaban ang translanguaging sa pag-aaral ng Ingles. What I think everyone is saying here is that translanguaging can be resorted to by teachers if it helps scaffold or if it helps facilitate the learning of English, right? So that's number one. Number two, yes, there's of course planned translanguaging. You plan for it, but there are also spaces in the classroom where spontaneous translanguaging can also happen. All right. And whether it is spontaneous or planned translanguaging, the principle that should actually guide it is it necessary? Is it needed? All right. And I think as teachers, if we have the agency to make certain changes in the classroom or certain things to do in the classroom, it is teachers who make that decision. Yang tanggalin lang natin siguro sa isip natin na mali ang gumamit ng L1 and it's absolutely mali, 'di ba? Ang nagga-guide diyan hindi scientific research. Ang nagga-guide sa ganyang klaseng pag-iisip hindi yung empirical data that research has actually produced. No, it's actually the other way around. English only practices are harmful to learning. And you don't need to take my word for it. Go for research driven articles. It's more about our ideologies that keep us away from exploring multilingual practices in the classroom rather than what the data actually show us. All right. Pero I think it was also somehow put forward by Cheche earlier, all right, na it's and actually a few others earlier na hindi naman anything goes, ha, all right. The point here really is for the teacher to do translanguaging, for example. It is um oh, one way to actually look at translanguaging as something that is principled. Strategizing is to view it as part of the competence of the English teacher. All right? Competent siya as a teacher kaya gumagamit siya ng translanguaging because they know when to use it. Iba yung sinabi kanina din ni Chet na ay nag-translanguage siya or nag-ano siya kasi hindi niya alam kung paano dumiretso ng Ingles. Di ba? Iba yon. Alright? So that means it has something to do with the real, competence in the language of that particular teacher. So iba yon. Ang ginagamit natin dito is part ng competence ng isang teacher, alright, ay yung paggamit ng translanguaging or L1 in order to become even a better teacher. So that's all I can actually say at this point. At maraming salamat because the conversations have been really very enriching.
Thank you so much, Sir Taps. I guess it's 2 minutes before 12 o'clock. We can now proceed to the closing remarks to be delivered by Ma'am Mergeline Salvatierra, faculty of the UCU College of Teacher Education.
Thank you so much, Sir Mark. So, good day, everyone. As we conclude today's program, which is the webinar toward Translanguaging-Aware Assessment, Rethinking English-Only Practices in Philippine Higher Education, let us carry forward the meaningful insights we gained, and may this discussion inspire us also to create a more inclusive, empowering, and culturally responsive assessment practices to our learners. And we extend our heartfelt gratitude to Ateneo Center for English Language Teaching for their continued support and partnership in conducting this free webinar. Also, our sincere appreciation to our mentors, Dr. Cecilia Suarez and Dr. Tupas, and of course, our panel discussants whose expertise and guidance have enriched today's learning experience in terms of translanguaging. And we are more enlightened now on translanguaging, especially when it comes to assessments. And we likewise acknowledge with deep respect the officials of Ordaneta City University, of course, our acting university president, attorney Dr. Amihan Melia Alcazar, our chief operating officer, attorney Dar A. Diga, and our VP for Academic Affairs, Dr. Josephine Lambinisha, and our VP for Administrative Affairs, Attorney Michael Henry Sevalieja, for their unwavering leadership and commitment to advancing quality education. Finally, thank you to all the participants, organizers, and educators who joined us today. Your presence and engagement affirm our shared vision of making education more inclusive and responsive to the linguistic realities of our students in tertiary level education. Again, let us continue working together as we move toward a more transformative and translanguaging-aware Philippine higher education. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Can we have a group photo? Thank you.
May we invite everyone to open your camera for the photo opportunity.
Maybe we can remove the slides. Stop sharing first. There. Yan.
Okay.
Opo.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Next. 1, 2, 3. That concludes our session for today. To end, please proceed. Please fill out the evaluation form to be flushed by Sir Ricky.
Thank you again, everyone. Thank you for supporting this group in this free webinar. Thank you so much. Congratulations again, everyone in this group.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much po.
Thank you po.
Maraming salamat po.
Let me
Thank you
add,
rin po, Ma'am Che and Sir Tops.
Sir, let's add something. Those questions posted that we didn't answer, we are going to answer them one by one. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And please join the other webinars later. So for this group.
Yes
Thank
po,
you.
we will. Thank you
Okay.
so much po. Maraming salamat po sa lahat. We'll stop
Thank you
the
po.
recording na po.